Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hi, my name is Patrick Devaney, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. Today, we're joining you from CoSN in Austin, Texas, and we have an interesting topic, creating a culture of security. So I'd like to begin by our guests introducing themselves, and I think we'll start with you, Rod.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. My name is Rod Houpe. I'm with Education Networks of America by Zayo. I serve as the Director of Business Development. I'm a former CIO in two large urban districts in the state of Ohio. Glad to be here.
Welcome. Eva.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Mendoza, and I serve as the Chief Information Technology Officer for San Antonio ISD.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frankie Jackson, and I am a former Chief Technology Officer for about 25 years. And prior to that, I spent about 10 years working in the NASA environment as a software engineer, and specifically working in the area of total quality management. So I'm here working independently. I serve with CoSN as one of their project directors. I also support the Cybersecurity Coalition we'll be talking about today. So it's just a pleasure for me to be here and look forward to our conversation.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us in this conversation today. I have to start with talking about security. So often brings about a feeling of anxiety and angst among those. So I guess the first question that I would kind of throw out there is, what would you say when somebody says, "Oh, I don't want to do that," or "Oh, that's hard. It just gets in the way." How would you debunk that, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And anybody who has thoughts, welcome to join in.
You know, saying that it's hard, yeah, we know this just being in the role, sitting in the seat as a CIO and CTO, it's hard anyway, right? And it's just a part of the job. So knowing that this is a portion of what you should do and what you need to do, you just have to take it on. Head on, right? You got to lean into, we use that term very frequently, but leaning into this topic will actually start to enable you to have a conversation and enable you to start to make change. And so I think it's critically important if you embrace it and think about what is next. And so I thought about those tough topics when I sat in the seat, and this was one of those. But you know, you just got to jump in, and there's no wrong place, but you got to start, right?
Yep. And I think, we live in this very digital world that's only becoming more and more dependent on technology and applications. And me being with the school district and all of us being in education, our main purpose is to prepare our youth, right, for the future. And, technology, being cyber aware, knowing about data privacy, like all of those are really critical things that our students and our youth need to know so they can be successful, right? So I think just, remembering your mission and your passion and why we're here, we need to do this for our youth.
I remember when I was hired to be a chief technology officer, the superintendent that hired me said that there were two things to keep in mind as part of the job, and that is that in our business of technology, in K-12, in education, is that we're dealing with the two most precious resources that parents and families are dealing with, and that is their money and their children. And so when I think of cybersecurity, I think of those two resources, and that cybersecurity can have such a negative impact financially if money is not secured, if resources aren't secured for families. But I also think of the identities of students and keeping them safe, because that's what we're here to do, not only to educate them, but to keep them safe and secure. And I think that brings about this intense feeling of doing the very best jobs that we can, and wanting to do the best job for our community and our stakeholders.
Well, I want to take off a little further on some of the comments here initially. Being a parent and a grandparent, it just seems like this is one more thing to be afraid of, one more thing to have to worry about. And to your point, Rod, you just have to lean into it. So I've long thought you can't eat an elephant in a single bite. You can't drink out of a fire hose without some adaptation. So I want to pose a question that's based a little bit on how do you step into this? How do you grow into it? Just recently read a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. And the thought there is that little changes compound over time to make big differences. And I'd like to pose the question, what little changes can be started with to grow into the big impact that we really want to have? Maybe we'll start with you, Frankie.
Okay. You know, and I was thinking about that. There's really two levels to consider. I think the first on a personal level, you know, we all wake up in the morning. First thing we do is get through our email, start working throughout the day. And I think the small habit that I've adopted is that as I go through any documents, any email, any correspondence, I'm very, very careful about who is sending the communication, what is attached. And if there's any question whatsoever, I just move on. I just don't do anything that might cause some sort of personal risk. I think at the organizational level, I think it really comes down to the habit of awareness and training. But even bigger than that is to really lay out a framework for teams and staff members and administrators and educators that we work with that takes into consideration the overall culture of being very, very astute in what the practices are and making certain that we're identifying those assets that need to be protected, whether it be student identification, confidential information, but also the systems that we use, the financial systems, the student information systems, the transportation systems. I think if you look at any school district, you're going to find that there are hundreds of information exchanges. So at that level, at the school level, I think it is just being keenly aware of where that sensitive data is and let that be at the top of your decision-making tree to say, is this going to create risk? It's got to be at the cornerstone of every decision we make. Yeah.
I like that you use the word habits, right? I haven't read the book yet, but it sounds great. Atomic habits, even then, because cybersecurity training and awareness, I think, is one of the biggest pieces, right? Our people. But it's not a checkbox where you take one course and you're done and then you're like all of a sudden secure. No, it's something that you need to instill all the time into staff. We do a really good job at SAISD of celebrating Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's in October. And it's great because we have all kinds of things. We have poster contests for the kids, and the poster winners get to be the lock screens on the Chromebooks for the month. So we have 4 and they love that. So we started out the first year, didn't have a lot of participation, and then it's just blown up every year. Do a lot of stuff, like I said, around that whole month, but doing something with 1 month doesn't really create a habit. You know, we got to always keep reminding people of what are the new things. These things are always changing too. One time I had a principal tell me, every year you come to our October principal meeting and you remind us to have strong passwords. I'm like, yes, and people still have weak passwords, so it's like, but you do want to make that, more engaging and more about them. A lot of teachers, principals, or campus staff, people who are not in IT don't realize that all it takes is one click, like one person to click on a phishing email, to bring in malware, to not have a strong password and get their account compromised. All it takes is one to go from, you're having a great day at school to like none of your technology systems work. And I think it's important for us, like in IT, to bring that awareness out and to let people know. And also to remind them that it's cybersecurity is their job, not just an IT function. I think that's something that a lot of technology leaders struggle with. We lead cyber initiatives, or we're the ones up there saying, have strong passwords, but at the end of the day, it's to protect everybody's data.
So, I mean, Eva, in and Frankie both touched on things, but it's modeling the behavior that you expect, right? So you talk about strong passwords, but if you're the leader of the organization and you have a weak password and you share it with somebody else, like your administrative assistant, you're not modeling the behavior, right? So, you have to really take into account what you want to see. But here's the other thing, also thinking about this disruption that will occur. That's a reality in our business. To really have that dialogue and set some expectations and sharing with individuals that, we are going to change behavior and it's going to be rough. It's human nature to resist when you're asked to change it. We're in technology, and so we should be the change agents, right? Most of the time we're the most resistant to that change because it's difficult and change is difficult,
Right.
but you have to get there. So we think about just in our personal lives, what did the pandemic do? It changed everything we've done. We had to rethink things. We had to do that differently and share some things. Not everybody appreciated, but we've learned some things out of that. No different from a cyber approach. You have to think about those things it's going to be tough. Rip the Band-Aid off, step into that space to say, this is why we're doing it, because we're going to be better at the end of this because. And along the way, talking about and showing and demonstrating the difference, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we're not going to always get it right too, right? We've had those experiences. I tell these ladies, I've shared with them this. I mean, I used to be 7 foot tall with a big afro. Now I'm 6'3", and
Yes.
So it's a little different right now. And so I think the disruption, explaining to people, it's going to be difficult, but you're right there with them as well. When you think about a time of change, I mean, that's widespread. And so if somebody's watching that behavior, guess what? It becomes infectious as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and one of the points that's made in the book is that the habit, if you don't do it right, then sometimes we're going to fail. If you at least try or hold steady, you have less work to do than if you don't do it, because now you have to make up for what you didn't do and then still make progress. So the constant effort, constant desire to move forward is important. And it sounds like it's at all levels, and it has to be just a big part of what you do. So as we start looking at this, let's pick it apart. So we're talking about private information. Let's talk about some examples of where information is shared. Is it really needed? And how do we start to pick apart those opportunities? Anybody have any examples of places where things are shared that we don't really need to have it?
I can share a story of a direct cyber attack that I endured. I think that's the word that comes to mind because that's what really happens when there is an attack, is that you endure that attack and work through it. A simple capability of just receiving an email that has been sent in a form that looks exactly like your school district's website, down to the exact pixel and location of where the logos are, and falling into that trap. And this is exactly what happened, to fill out an HR survey and put in your login credentials, even though the training and awareness of communication had been put out to say, we will never ask for your user ID and password. There were high-level staff members that fell victim to putting in their credentials, user ID, and password. And then once that occurred, that information was captured. The intruder then worked in the middle of the night to change the email rules, so that what you were seeing, what these 5 users were seeing in their email queue, they weren't getting some of the emails when they were being redirected to change their bank deposit information. So the routing of their paychecks were going to a different banking institution. They only noticed when their paychecks weren't being deposited in an auto draft. And so that was some sensitive information that was shared. Financial resources were lost. But I think from an ed tech leadership perspective, as the chief technology officer, it's a loss in credibility. It's a loss in feeling like you've let others down, your community down, your superintendent down, just because even though there was awareness and training. There were users that just didn't get it, that there will never be asked for their user ID and password, but they did it anyway, and we suffered from it.
We recently went through an initiative, and we called it hacker proofing our website. We like to be transparent to our community and share a lot of information and good stories of what we're doing in the district. But what we found is that the departments were posting manuals, guides, staffing information, all kinds of emails. And we've gone through, and you always have to find this balance, because we wanted to make the information easy to find, but easy to find for the right people. Right. So we had to go through all the departments, met with the web coordinators, educate them on what we were doing and how hackers research information, because they're doing a lot of research online before, and for us, it was very easy to find a lot of information, but just we had to, educate our different departments and campuses on what information should be out there. Because the website's really for the community and the families. Like, does a parent really need to know that this person processes checks for vendors from A through G? Probably not, right? So we told our staff, ask yourself those questions, like, does a family or community member need to know this? If they do, then it goes on the website. And if it doesn't, we have an intranet page, an internal page that's behind a login. So all manuals, all guides go, on the intranet page. We have recently finalized that initiative. So I'm very, very proud that we don't have any more of that information out there, because, just emails alone could be useful for a bad actor. Yes.
Patrick, love the question. I'm sitting here smiling and beaming because of their approach at San Antonio. Because her predecessor is a good friend of mine, Dr. Ken Thompson, and we've had this conversation in dialogue.
Yeah.
and I said, my conversation with Dr. Thompson and to San Antonio, why do you have a lot of this information going forward? He asked me to review some things, and I wasn't part of the hacker group, but it was just one of those Saturday afternoon conversations that we were just talking, and I'm like, Doc, got some information. I don't think it's relevant, right? Because thinking about when I was a CIO in the district, we had table organizations present. And why? Because as much as they look on the web to find out the bad actors do, and guess what? The bad actors are listening to us right now, so we're giving away tips. But the fact is, how do you because they're going to find other ways in, if you will, but don't give them the the silver lining.
Make it easy.
Right? Make them work for it, right? And so taking down that information and then putting it somewhere within your model of an intranet is great, and the password protected and things like that, but that's only as secure as how you put in your security controls, and access controls are in place as well. So it's an ongoing event, and so my experience has been similar to Frankie's, similar to Eva. We had individuals that just gave up information and credentials. And, and me personally, we did something that was really, it was basic 101, but didn't think about it. We told the world when we had a major initiative, when we were cutting over a financial system. We announced the date, we put it on the web, we were advertising. We were so proud of our efforts. I didn't think about that because I didn't think the bad actors would like revert and still post like, oh my gosh, mistake number one, right? It's not that we couldn't recover from it, but it was the fact that we should have thought ahead of time in our planning and thinking about that. And so that's the other thing, planning your initiatives and thinking about these things and having everybody around the table that are part of the design, because this is not an IT issue, it's an everybody issue. Sure is. Like there's impact with your community and your board members, the elected officials, and so it involves everybody. So it's an important thing.
So, it's obvious that it's practices and it's procedures that weigh into this. And Eva, I'll go back to you because you hinted around something that you're doing with your student population and teaching the students earlier, because it's one thing to move the community, but it's another thing to plant the seeds that are going to make it easier over time. And I'd love to hear more about your Cybersecurity Month and some of the other initiatives you have with the kids to help teach them earlier.
Yeah, so we do the poster contest, which is a big hit every year. Everybody looks forward to that. But then through our libraries, we also have lessons for them throughout the month, right? Talking about everything from cyberbullying to data privacy and protection, and then cybersecurity and physical security. So that all gets wrapped into that month, and there's a lot of discussion going on at all grade levels, from our littles all the way to high school. Participating in those lessons. We also have internships. So we do have high school students that rotate throughout our cybersecurity team. And they come in, they do some job shadowing. And so they get a little bit of hands-on experience, not too much. Our staff's always a little concerned. They don't want to give them access to some of our networkings, but they get to see and how it is in the real world, and hopefully, they get inspired and want to continue in that. So we brought up some programs. We participate in career days. And a lot of times for IT folks, like my server guy's like, you want me to do what? Like, you want me to go talk to students? Like, no, I want to stay, back here behind my keyboard and monitor where I feel real comfortable. But, at the end of the day, again, our purpose is to educate students, and we are part of that, the IT team. So getting them out there to talk to students is something that they might not feel comfortable with at first, but then once they're out there, it's like, a lot of them can't stop talking, and the students, look up to that. So getting our people out there in the schools, talking to them, and having those initiatives is really brought more awareness and getting more people talking about these topics.
So what other resources are there? We don't have to do this alone, do we? So let's hear some other folks that we can lean on.
Well, I think as you were talking of, I was thinking about, some other resources. For example, we're here at the CoSN conference. One of the initiatives of CoSN is to instill a trusted learning environment practice. And within those practice areas, there's 5 of them. There is an area that addresses classroom practices. And part of that, a big piece of it is parent communication. So you talk about student education and educating students in their curriculum. But I think another important piece, which is in the trusted learning environment, is to think about how we communicate with parents so that we create an awareness with those parents so that they understand the cybersecurity risk. So dedicating, for example, a complete maybe space on the website so that parents can do their own research with vetted links to privacy and to explain to parents the importance of cybersecurity and how their data, private data about their children is being used, and what's being done to ensure the protection of that information. I think is so important.
One of the resources I know that we use with our parents is commonsensemedia.org.
It's free.
Yes, it is free and it is out there. So we call it our family power hour every month. And in October, we go present to the parents, and they have so many questions around gaming, online shopping. My student was doing this. Are they supposed to be able to do that? All kinds of questions. We also offer that. I presented this year to our ESL community. So did the presentation in Spanish and in English, and was able to have that dialogue with the parents. And I think we're a great resource for them. And then we can provide them additional resources so they can have the conversations at home as well.
Well, and they're going home with these one-to-one devices. So the fact that, you're offering, multi-language communication with parents is really impressive.
Yeah. I'm fluent in Spanish, but then when you get to the technical terms, it's tricky. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute.
Translation.
Yes.
I think, when we think about digital citizenship, and that's a part of the curriculum, and, that's the instructional part. And we think that we're always geared towards the kids, but it's also the adults in the system, right? And we really should think about that. And what's afforded them, but it's also the frequency of the conversation. It's not just a month, it's every day. And how do you actually take that out? And then you think about the partnerships that you have in a district and the tools that are out there in the market space. There are a lot of frameworks to be considered, right? But not for, as Eva was just sharing, being fluent in technology. As technologists, we've been notorious for speaking in tech speak, right? And so it's always good for us to be able to speak in terms where our communities, our customers can actually understand what we're actually saying. And so it's not the techno babble is what's talking over them, but talking and informing and educating them so they can make wise decisions, right? So you're informed. But also along that same path, there are tools and frameworks that I started to go down the path of thinking about what is NIST, what is CIS, what are all these things. But, now that there's the NIST EDU solution for cybersecurity readiness and assessment, the work that Dr. Jackson Frankie has started researching and working with ClassLink to develop, you can now actually see the opportunities of where you have risk and create a plan, right? A pathway to make sure that your whole organization is safe and secure, because it's about this continuous improvement. You need to understand where you are. I started off with saying you have to lean into it, right? And so if you lean into that effort, you have to know and document exactly where you're starting from. And so thinking about that, and you don't have the expertise, it's okay to say, I need help, right? And so finding those players in the space that have that expertise to be able to do it, but also find partners, not vendors. There's a distinct difference. Dare I say it? Vendors are those ones that are just wanting to sell you something. And when you're having a bad day, and you will have one, are they going to be there to help you through that crisis and situation to make sure that you're in the best interest of your students, of your community? Your strategic partners are going to be proactive and even reactive in a situation to make you whole. And that's most important, because at the end of the day, it's the confidence and the trust that they develop and built with you for enablement purposes. And so it's critically important when you think about those resources, that when you're thinking about partnering, finding the right partner that can help you and to deliver.
One that you trust.
One that you can trust, right?
Well, and one of the interesting parts about trust is you can trust, but you also have to verify, and that, to borrow words from, I think Ronald Reagan was the one that came up with that. We're going to trust, but we're going to verify as well. And a willingness to understand that none of us are perfect. And while this may cost us extra to verify this, we're going to do it because we're committed to the long term and the progress towards the ultimate goal. Other thoughts? Anybody have anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to bring into the milieu?
I'm thinking, Rod, as you were talking, I'm thinking, when I work with chief technology officers and ed tech leaders at the state and national level, what many of them will say is, just tell me what I need to do. I'm willing to spend money. I'm willing to work hard, but in all honesty, I'm not really sure where I need to start. Just give me a map and I'll do whatever you said. And I think Rod, you talked about the NIST EDU, the new cybersecurity framework for education, I think is a framework that lays a foundation of practices in the area of cybersecurity that are easy to get your arms around. If we were to look at the rubric that is built around that framework, there's 5 function areas, and then there are 23 categories. There are many other frameworks that are far more complex, that are almost just overwhelming for a chief technology officer, CIO, or anyone in the technology department. So using a framework of standard cybersecurity practices that are understandable, that have been developed for education, not for other industries, but for education, to really determine where you are, what your current state is. Where am I, say, on a scale of 1 to 5? A 5 being optimized, a 1 being in the initial stages of developing cybersecurity practices, all the way to a level 3, which might mean defined. And we call that organizational maturity. So I think, Rod, you said, you have to know where you are today so that you can determine what the opportunities are for improvement. And they may be these small atomic habits that we started out talking about. What are some things that we can do that will help move the needle, help us improve in this continuous improvement continuum to get better? And if we, have atomic habits, those that could help us be better, be more safe, be more secure, then I think any education institution would be interested in looking at some practical ways to improve, especially in the area of cybersecurity.
Yes, I definitely, if I can add. So we have struggled in the past to bring in cybersecurity staff, especially staff that, at an expert level. So what we had to look at was growing from within, tapping on the networking team, tapping on some of the other team that was interested in cyber and learning it. So when you have an assessment, that you just take, it tells you where you're at, it's not very helpful if my staff's, learning and kind of building as we go. So having a tool and a resource that helps you, if you're a level 2, get to a level 3 and gives you a roadmap on how to do that. It just makes it, again, very beneficial for the staff. I think, attracting and recruiting and retaining the cybersecurity experts for school districts is a struggle nationwide. So any resources like this that our team can use, will be a great help.
And just to piggyback off of that, I think even for industry providers to think about how they can leverage the tool to be an asset to the district, right? Because the expertise that you have within our districts, and we know because we have those experts, but there's always something that's coming up the next day. And so we have time to dedicate to that. Or can I look at the issue that I'm facing and tackle it differently? Maybe I do a managed service for that, right? Now I have access not to one person, but to a team of individuals that are going to have my eyes and ears focused on that one specific thing that we do, right? That need. Maybe that's a challenge, right? Instead of all my licensing for one particular product, I shift my spending and think about how I can use this, because this is going to be longer term, and make this, instead of a capital expenditure, it becomes an operational, it's an OpEx model, and make it a part of that. So we're talking about thinking outside of the box, finding those resources, but also making sure that those resources are coming from the same level playing set that your team is understanding. They should have understanding of the industry, but doesn't mean that they have to do it every day, right? Now we're changing habits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And we're thinking differently. And what can we do differently? And that's going to be that continuous cycle. But I mean, first is recognition thing. I know I have this.
No, I have a problem.
I know
That's
I
right.
have a problem, and I know where I am
Yeah.
on the continuum. And then how, and it's gonna change
Yeah.
depending on what the industry and what's going on from day to day.
And it's better than not having a plan at all.
Amen.
In involving the strategic plan to help drive the objectives and the goals to get better.
Yeah, and your plan usually has an actual success and outcome, right? So you can measure against. If you don't have that, you
How do
just
you
mark
measure
your
it?
time. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Goals very often are best served in hindsight to see how far you've come. It gives you a direction, but also it gives you the ability to measure how far you've come and what still is not addressed. Let me try to summarize a little bit here. And if anybody has any other thoughts right up front, no? Okay. Let me try to summarize a little bit. I mean, I think that one of the points that's very, very clear here is this is a challenge. It's a concern. It's something that is everywhere around us, whether it's our kids, our community, our staff. It needs to be an order that is, or a thought that is in our minds at all times. It's not something that's going to be addressed with one solution. One size does not fit all. One solution doesn't fit all. And it's also not something that is static. It is a constant evaluation that has to be done. So the benefit of the habits conversation is the compounding of the habits and the improvements over time and the magnifying of those improvements. And so taking this on with that in mind is helpful, especially if you know where you're going. You can see how far you've come. You can see how much more you still have to do. There are also a lot of tools that are available. They're not just internal, but they are with external resources. They're also with the community that you work with and the companies that you work with, and the term partnership. Finding those that share an objective is very, very important to supporting this. And little things can turn into big problems. So while none of us are perfect, we have to continuously work towards those improvements. What did I miss?
We could probably be here another.
I know we could be here another. We could be here for the whole conference.
But
You mentioned partnerships and engaging others that are trusted and others that are strategic partners. Rod mentioned that. So when I think about the Cybersecurity Coalition for Education, I think about that partnership of building resources to help support schools and ed tech leaders through free training, through high quality training, through providing a education rubric for gauging the level of progress for cybersecurity. But then the other component that we really didn't talk about was designing a third-party evaluation that could help chief technology officers and ed tech leaders validate, verify the level of maturity, so that it's an outside resource that is willing to come in and help from the spirit of growth and do so at an economical rate that I think is what's needed, because the role of a chief technology officer or CIO is monumental in the amount of work. And so sometimes to have an additional partner or resource to help in that evaluation of the self-assessment, I think is one other component that is extremely valuable.
If I can just, it's just, at one point in time, we're all new in our careers and roles. Find a mentor, find somebody, create your own personal board of personal board of directors that will allow you to share your knowledge, share your information, work with them, to be mentored, to be coachable, right? In order for them, it's not a judgmental thing, but it's more of, I want to make sure that you're doing the things or learn from the mistakes of the seasoned individual that's been in that seat, because we've seen more, right? And so, and it's ever changing in what's going on. So I think finding those set of individuals that you can trust, you don't need 30.
That's too much sharing.
Too much sharing, because that's confusion. So one or two or three of those individuals that are not going to just give you the answer that you want to hear, but they're going to give you the answer that you need to hear in order for you to be successful in what you're thinking about.
Well, and I always like to use the expression, it's much better to fail in a safe environment than to fail when the consequences are very, very real. Here we learn from failures either way.
Yes.
But wouldn't it be better if we did it in an environment that the consequences were not negative, but only the learning came out of it?
Absolutely. Love that a lot. And I think that's what we work in a learning environment. That's expected. And so that's okay. And failing forward, it's good because you're still going forward, and it's something that you can pick up from. I love that.
Well, and I want to make this comment now. So often people grumble about the protections of cybersecurity and password rules and all of the extra precautions that are there. And I can say certainly after having this conversation with the three of you for the last half an hour, that you're doing it to try to help them, to try to protect them. That people need to start from the place that this is a safe place. And the reason that they're doing this is for my benefit. And while it might be an irritant, it's going to be a lot less irritating than the problems that come if they don't. So there's a shout out to all the CTOs in the room. show your CTOs a little love, the CIOs. I'd like to thank all of you for this great, rich conversation. Welcome to have you back at some point again when we talk about security. And I thank you for your thoughts and your comments today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.